Okay, so on by the Mishnah, the bottom of Bava now. Went back to the topic of I know. We've gone away from it for the last blot or two. So I know is the din that if you overcharge or underpay for something, we'll stick with the Chacham, the Tanakama. If it's by a sixth, exactly 1/6, then the din is that you can either request that the mekach, the whole deal, is undone, or you can get a refund on the amount of the overpayment or the underpayment. But doesn't apply to everything. These are the things that I know doesn't apply to. Ha'avadim, an eved, if someone purchased an eved, let's say he bought an eved from Shimon, and he overpaid by a sixth. Ashtaris, we're going to see what the case of a star is. But B'derech Klal, a star is talking about where someone, Reuben had a star chayv against Shimon, and he sold it to someone, and he paid more or less than the value of the star, how much he could get. Karkos, and karka, if someone buys karka for a sixth more or sixth less than its value. Hekdeshus. So hekdesh is talking about if you have someone who's makdish something and now it's coming to be paid from hekdesh, mechaleh from hekdesh. So he's paying money to hekdesh to free it up. Morning. So we're talking about, we started the Mishnah on Bava Meral. We're talking about going back to I know, which we haven't been on for a while. So we're saying that the din I know does not include avodim and Bava Meral on toward the bottom. That does include avodim and shtaris and karkois, which, but throughout Shas, these things are all often, certainly shtaris and karka are lumped together. Avodim and karka are lumped together, and shtaris often are exceptions. And hekdesh as well. So they don't have oino, enlam tashlum kefa, tashlum chamisha. There's no din of kefil on these things. There's no din of dalad v'hei. Obviously, dalad v'hei only applies to doesn't apply to avodim or shtaris or karka. It only could potentially be applied to an animal. Shemechinam, if you're shemechinam on these things, ain't an nishba. If someone is a shemechinam on these, on let's say an eved, he would not make a shavua to say that it was stolen or lost, which would pat him. And if he's a nice sachar who would normally pay for their theft or their loss, he doesn't pay. Like we said, Torah does not make a shavua. The reason is going to be because these things, there's no shavua on them. So, and he also won't pay if it's stolen. From a Shem Sach would normally pay. Shimon Omer, Kachem Shu Chai Bachar Yusan, he disagrees with what we just said. He says Kachem Shu Chai Bachar Yusan. We talked about this yesterday, right? If someone says, there's two ways a person can give kachem. He could say harei alai or harei zeh. He could say, I'm accepting on myself to bring a carbon, and he has to come up with a carbon. So he's going to be chayav achar yusa. If something happens to the animal, he still has a responsibility. But if he says harei zu, if he says I want this animal to be a carbon, so that animal comes kaddish, and then something happens to it, then there's no achrayis. It's hegdish's loss. He already gave it to hegdish. Something happened to it. It's on hegdish. So he says kachem shu chayav b'achar yusan. If he gave a carbon, if he said harei alai, where he's chayav b'achrayis, so it's as if it's still his. So yesh lehen oino. Even though we said in the ratio of the Mishnah that kachem it's not going to apply, he says yesh. He disagrees. He says yesh lehen oino. If he's going to be makdish, it's going to be a din of oino. But like we said before, there's not going to be a din of Aina. In addition to what the case, the dinim that we said before, all the different things that we said before, of a shtar and a karka and an evid, the same thing would be a sefer Torah or a behema or a jewel. None of these things will have a din of Aina. The Gemara will explain later why not. Amru elu, and the Tanakama disagrees. The Chacham disagree. They say no, it's limited to the first case of the Mishnah. We don't add a sefer Torah behema and a margos. So where does this come from? That this list of things, karka and avodim and shtaris and hektish, don't have a din of Aina. This is the original pasuk of Aina. You can't be ma'an him. You can't overcharge. And if you do so, he's going to be the person who was overcharged or undercharged, as the case may be. If it's the seller who was underpaid, he's going to get compensated, or he can undo the transaction. But we use a lashon in the hand of your friend. That suggests only something that can be handed from one person to another. It excludes karka, because karka is not handed from one person to another. And avodim, as we find throughout Shas, avodim and karka are always often put into the same basket. So avodim are hukish lekarka, so they also will get the same din that there's no oino. Rashi says shehukshu lekarkois v'snachaltem oisam hukshu la'achuza. The pasuk is the pasuk v'snachaltem oisam l'neichem achreichem l'shesh l'chuza oilam b'hem tavoidu b'achayim b'nei Yisrael ish b'achiv l'sirda b'y b'farch. It says l'gabi a eved that you're going to be yarshin it l'neichem rechem l'shesh l'chuza. L'shesh l'chuza normally refers to a karka. So we can say karka and avodim, the Torah amakish them, they have the same dinner. Yotzu shtaris. The chsiv, how do we exclude shtaris, right? If someone sells a shtar for less than its value or more than its value, or a person overpays for it. The chsiv kisimchu, meaning that you buy a note and you overpay for it. The chsiv, it's hard for me to understand that case. I have to admit. How can you overpay? It says on it the amount. The shtar says on it it's for $1,000. Well, I know is where a person doesn't realize that he's overpaying. But on the note it says how much it's for. So how did he overpay? Maybe the guy didn't look at it. He's like, if it's like 20 pages of fine print, and somewhere in there it says it's for $1,000, and he never looked at it. The guy told him it's for $1,000, and it really is only for $900 or for $800.
Can the star be on the chayfetz?
So the star is a right to a chayfetz, and usually star is for money. Saying a star is a note, saying that you get this chayfetz, and maybe the chayfetz was worth less than you paid for it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe. I don't see any reason why not. Okay. So in any case, Yotzu Sev, how do we know to exclude stars from din of Aina? There's no din of overpayment for stars. When you sell a sold object, it means something that it itself is machar and it itself can be purchased. When you buy something, it's not the star itself that you're purchasing, you're buying what it presents. The point of a star is only that it represents ability to get something else, but in itself, it's not its own value that you're buying. So that's not included in the din of Oina. If someone sells a star to a perfume dealer, meaning to use it like lafak api sluchas, we had it before, to use it as a stopper on top of a perfume flask. So then he's buying the star not for what it represents, but just to use as paper. Yesh lemoino. That there is Oina. So Gemara Pshita. It's pashut. If you're buying paper, just because there's writing on it that says a star, it doesn't make it less valuable as paper. If it has some value for that purpose, that's what you're buying it for. Why wouldn't there be Oina? So Gemara Lafuka Midir of Kahana. When it says it's coming to exclude from Kahana, Dama Ein Oina Leprutus, like we said before, that this when you buy stars to use as stoppers, it's not really worth very much. And we said that there's 8 prutos in the Isser, and there's a man who says you can never have Oina for less than the Isser, unless you're selling something worth at least an Isser. So as this perfume stopper would be less than the amount that that would be included in Oina. It's only if you say the stammet, the chaylik on Rav Kahana, that even a shava pruta, there's a din of Oina, then you could have that these stoppers could have a din of Oina. According to Rav Kahana, it says it has to be a minimum of 8 prutas that you're overcharging or undercharging from by more than a sixth. It would never be these stoppers. Kamash Malan. Yeshanola prutas. Coming to tell you not like Rav Kahana. Okay, so we got through the easy ones, really. We got through Star, and we got through Avodim and Karkois. Now we're coming to Hegdish. Hegdish, we're going to eventually go and catch him, but even now we already know that Hegdish always makes them complicated. The Gemara Hegdashis. Where do we know that Hegdashis is no din of Oina? Amakra, Achiv. Achiv alei Hegdish. Only for your brother you pay Oina, but when you're buying something from Hegdish, there's no din of Oina. Masnif l'Rabbi bar Mama. Hey, going back on what we said, that the shtaros are excluded because it says it's not included in Yad. I'm sorry, the karka is excluded because it says davar nikne miyad liyad. Correct there, Masnif l'Rabbi bar Mama. Kol hechad chsev yada mamashu. Because the Torah says that's coming to exclude karka because karka can't be handed over. Is it true that whenever the Torah says yad, it means literally to hand over? This is a very strange question, and you'll certainly think the same thing that the Gemara is going to answer. The pasuk is talking about ki cheshbon Sichon melech ha'Amori, Cheshbon, the king from Sichon, the king of the Amori, who nilcham b'melech Moav, and he fought with the melech Moav Harishon. And he took all of his land from his hand in conquest until Arnon. Does it mean that he took it miyada? It means that he took the whole land into his hand. Ella mirshusai. Elamai, what does miyada mean? It means mirshusai. It means he acquired it from him. Doesn't mean that he literally took in his hand. So why do we say over here when the Torah says economy out of misecha, that it means literally only something that could be hand from hand, but not karka? Are you trying to tell me that whenever it says yada, it doesn't mean yada mamash? It always means mirshusai. It just means a way of saying that he takes it away from him. The pasuk says, if someone has a geneva in his hand, he's going to be chayiv to pay kefil. That would only tell you if it's in his hand literally. How do I know even if, let's say let's say an animal came into his rishus and then he closed the door in front of it, so now it can no longer get out. He's also going to be chayiv for geneva. Torah says if he matzah, it tells you not just biyadei mamish, but even if it went out, even if it was found by his hand and he trapped it in. Smash. If not for the fact that the Torah was marbe himatzah timatzah, I would have said yada means literally in his hand, that he picked it up with his hand. But any other way of acquiring a gneva, he would not be chayav. So this is not like what we just said, that yada means bershusai. Besu Tanya, and in addition it says, Benosam biyada, legabe an isha who gets a get, you have to put in her hand, Eli Eli yada. It only tells you if you put the get into her hand literally. Gaga chatzer v'akifa minam. How do we know that if you put it into her chotzer, she also is kind of time and loy v'nosam mikomakom. The Torah says v'nosam mikomakom. Time of the Gazer Rachman v'nosam halavach yavina kol hecha the Gazer yada yada mamish. If not for that, I would have thought the only way she could be get a get, she would kind of get to be meguresh, as if it goes into her hands literally. El. So the Gemara gives the very, I think, pashut answer. El kol yada yada mamishu. Generally, yad means literally his hand. That case, really, yada, whenever the Torah says it, we darshan it to mean literally. And the you asked me from the case of the person who conquered from Sichain, what was it, from Kicheshban or Sichain Melech HaMeirihi, Nuchem Melech Moav Harisha V'yikach Kol Artsa Miyadai. Over there, obviously, it doesn't mean literally. There's no choice. It doesn't mean that he rolled up the land into his hand. So over there, we say it means rishos. But all the other cases, when the Torah says yadai, we do assume it means literally, unless it's impossible to learn it like that. Which, is very sensible. And you would have thought by yourself, obviously, when it says, talking about he conquered something, it doesn't mean he took it in his hand, but the Torah, whenever it says yadai, the Torah does darshan it. Boy, Reb Zera. Zera asks a question. Schiris, if you rent something, yesh lo yoino or yein lo yoino. Is there a din oino or not? Right? We know there's a din of oino if you buy a car. If they charge you, the guy in the dealership says you need a rust proof and you need an undercarriage, and it ends up being an extra $12,000 on your $20,000 car. Or I should say on your, that's about $50,000 car comes out to 62, or $60,000 car comes to 72. So it's 1/6 more. That's certainly enough. What if you are leasing and they overcharge you on the lease? Is there a din of ayna on that? So Kamar Mimkar Marachmano, do we say the Torah says, when there's a purchase, that's when the Torah says, but not rental. Or do you say there's no difference? Does the Torah say only if you make a permanent sale? Mimka stomach siv. It says mimka, any kind of sale. Each day is when you're renting something, you're buying it for the day. So there's no reason that should be distinguished. It's also a kind of sale. It's a sale for that day, and therefore it's included in the din of Ayna. Boy Rava. Chitin v'zorim b'karka ma. If someone took chitin and they planted them in the ground, ma'u. Yesh lahem ha'yein lahem Ayna. Do they have a din of Ayna or not? Now, the Gemara is obviously going to have to refine this question a little more. Do you treat it as if it was the seeds that you put into the ground, the tvua, the grains that you put into the ground to plant? Do you look at it as if it's the same thing as if you put it into a kli, and therefore it has a din of ayna, just like if you overcharged for seeds? Or do you say that it's bottled into the ground? And like we said, karka, there's no din of ayna. So too, seeds that are planted don't have a din of ayna. So what's the case? If he said he made a deal with a worker. He told him, I want you to plant. His landscaper came by. He said, or not a landscaper, his worker, professional plant. And he said, I want you to put 6 son of seeds into the ground. And the Adam come and say you only put in 5. Anything where a person is overcharged because he was provided less than what he was told he was getting at, and it can be counted or weighed. I feel I know chayzer. You always chayzer, right? Then I know is if I go and I buy something that the price is not clear, or I'm fooled about what the price is. I thought I was getting something that's worth. I thought that the price was 72 and it was really 50. So I don't know. I always keep saying I thought it was 74 and it was really 72. So it's 1/6 more than it's supposed to be. But if I go into the store and I say I want to buy 6 pounds of potatoes, and they only gave me 5 pounds of potatoes, or even if they only gave me 4.9, I said I was going to get 6 pounds of potatoes, and they gave me 5.9. That's not that's not overcharging. Where I don't know. That's where you just didn't give me what you promised. That's a mekach tois. You didn't. That's not the deal. Is something where there was a lack of clarity. Person wasn't aware of the value, but to misrepresent the amount you're getting, that's a mekach tois. So this case that you just try to give, we try to say where someone told someone to plant 5 pounds of seeds. He said he made a deal with him that you're going to put in six sowing of seeds, and he put in only 5. That's certainly a mekach tois, even if it's less than a shir. I know. Ella the Amar Iu. Rather, the cases where he said the owner of the land said to the worker, to his contractor, Shadoi boy kedaboyelo, plant the seed, plant the field what it needs. And he didn't put in the full amount that was needed. So over there, then it's already not something that's measurable. It wasn't that he had to put in specifically 10 pounds or 6 pounds. He had to put however much it was. So that's a more subject to interpretation. So yesh la'noinoi ein la'noinoi. That can we ask, Commander Shadi Bekadadam. I mean, is if he put it into a basket, in which case certainly there would be a dinner, but lino agavara. Or do you say it's bottled to the ara? Another question. Nishboin alein or ein nishboin alein? Another question about these seeds that were planted. Rashi says, do you make one of the number of shvuos that we've talked about? We know another din of karka, and until now we've been talking about the gabi ainah. Another din of karka is there's no shvuah on karka. So you make a moida mixus on karka, or if you have to give land to a shimer to watch, or if you have an eid echad that says you owe him this amount of land, there's no shvuah deraisa on karka. What about these seeds that we've talked about, where you place them in the ground, but they're still discrete seeds? They haven't. If they once they turn into a plant, once they already get shroshim, once they root into the ground, they change from a seed into a plant, and obviously it's no longer something discrete. It's not metaltalin. It's certainly kak. But before that, do you make a shvuah on them? Command the shadi bekadidam v'nishba alein. Are they considered like this? As long as they're still discrete seeds, they're still as if they were in a kli, and you make a shvuah on them. Or do you say it's bottled to the land? And therefore you don't make a shvuah on them like karka. Another question. Oimer. The din of Oimer, it's not spheres Oimer. We're talking about the carbon Oimer. When you bring the minchas Oimer, you bring the barley seeds. That's what's matir the achila of the tvua from the previous year, right? So we have Yashan and Chadash. Chadash is Aser. Chadash Aser min HaTorah, like the Chassam Sefer says. That's only a play on words. Obviously, the ikar din is that the new seeds that are grown before the Omer is brought, until the Eimer is brought, they're Aser. And after the Eimer is brought, you're allowed to eat those seeds. So what happens if you have seeds that were planted, like we said, the same case, they were planted into the ground. So if they would be out of the ground, certainly the Eimer would be mat to them la'achila. What about what you planted in the ground? I'm matirna, ain't I'm matirna. So we're gonna have to refine this question. Hechidami. Ida ashresh tinina, ida loy ashresh tinina. We already have, if you're trying to decide about plants that come out of these seeds, whether they're going to have the din, if that they're treated as from the previous year, pre-Eimer or post-Eimer, we have a Mishnah that says what's the din? The Tanan. If you plant a seed, if you plant a seed before the Eimer, and then it took root before the Eimer was brought, Eimer matirin, then the Eimer will be mat to them. Bim lav, but if you have a seed that you planted and it was in the ground and it hadn't yet taken root, it means it could be removed in the ground as is, and then it takes root after the Eimer, asurin achiyava Eimer abba. Then it's considered part of the next year's planting, and it's going to be usher for another year, right? You have to wait for it to sprout, and then you harvest it, and you wait for it's part of the next year. Since the shroshim were there already, then the shroshim first came after this year, after the Eimer was already brought, so it's already part of the next year's. So the Gemara is questioning, what are you asking about? You're asking about this seed that was planted, what grows from it, whether it's going to be mutter from the Eimer or not, that depends. We have a Mishnah that says it depends on whether it took root before or after the Eimer was brought. So Gemara loitzrich. The chatzdinu, he planted v'zarinu kaidem l'Eimer. And he planted them before the Eimer. V'asalei Eimer, and the Eimer came b'chalif v'layu, and it came on them. V'lei ashers kaidem l'Eimer. Mal l'minka to meichel minai. The question is, can he remove those seeds that were in the ground before the Eimer? And then the Eimer came, so it hadn't, right? So if it continued at that point and then took root, it would certainly be considered from the next year. But he didn't let it take root. He took it out of the ground. Can he then take it out of the ground, these seeds that have been put in, and eat them now? Do we say, do you say it's as if it was put into, even though it was in the ground, it's as if it was put into a kli, and the fact that it was in the ground is irrelevant because it's still a complete grain, and he takes it out, and it became mutter from the Eimer. Or do you say it's batal to the land? Zak the Gemara, teku. It remains a question. I think it's a teku on the last one also. We never gave an answer on it. Yeah. Okay, now it gets back to hektish, which is always the difficult part. Amar Rav Amar Rav Chasa, boy Rav Ami. Rav Ami asks this question. I know ein lahem bittul mekach. I know ein lahem bittul mekach yesh lahem. We've been talking now about Oino, and we know there are three parts of Oino. There's three different, less than a sixth, we say, is disregarded, it's Mechila. More than a sixth is Bittul Mekach. We say that the Mekach, either person could say, I want to be Mvatal the Mekach. And the din of Oino is exactly a sixth. So, Ramami asked, that which we say, that there's no Oino on Karka and on Avodim and Shtaris, does that mean Oino ein lahem? A sixth doesn't have a bittul mekach v'yesh lahem, but it still has the din of bittul mekach. It still has the din of it's more than a sixth, then it's batul. Meaning, you look at it as a totally separate thing. The din of bittul mekach is because this is an egregious overcharge, and therefore there's no deal. The whole deal is it's like a mekach tois. It's not a intense form of Oino. Is a different thing. Oino is a din of a refund, or you have a choice, you could undo the deal, but that's Oino. But more than a sixth is already a different din. It's a din of of Bittul Mekach, and therefore the psukim that we used to exclude Evet and to exclude Shtar and to exclude Karka would not apply to more than a sixth. The whole din that we excluded was only a sixth. So it's when you learn this, you learn this whole thing of Ainah, and then you find out it's only applying to a very specific case of exactly a sixth. So that's his question. You say more than a sixth of these exclusions from Ainah, do that apply to that as well? Or maybe no, it's still part. It's all part of Ainah. More than a sixth is just one of the categories of Ainah. And since these things, let's say Karka is excluded from Ainah, it's also excluded where it's more than a sixth, and therefore it's going to be a Bittul Mekach. Amar of Nachman, Hada Amar of Chasa, Pashat Rav Ami was Pashat, Ainah ein lahem Bittul Mekach yesh lahem. He says there's no Ainah, but there is Bittul Mekach. Rav Yaina says, Hagdashis, Rav Yirmiyah HaKarkais, Rav Yaina says Lagabi Hektish, and Rav Yirmiyah says Lagabi Karka, the Travai Mishra Rav Yechid Amar Ainah ein lahem Bittul Mekach yesh lahem. Both Rav Yaina and Rav Yirmiyah are talking about this rule that we just said, that Ainah ein lahem, that there's no Ainah, there's no din of a sixth on these things, but they do have a din of Bittul Mekach, but they disagree about what it's applying to. Rabbi Yaina says it's going on Hektish, that Hektish has a din, it doesn't have a din of Ainah, but it has a din of Bittul Mekach. Rabbi Yirmiyah says it's on Karka. So the Gemara now explains. Manda Amar Hagdashis. Rabbi Yaina who said this din, that which we said, Ainah yesh lahem, Bittul Mekach yesh ein lahem, yesh lahem, that it does have a din of Bittul Mekach. He's saying Hagdashis kol shekein HaKarkais. He would certainly say HaKarkais. And as far as like this, the reason why is more reason to say, if you say that there's a Bittul Mekach on Hektish, you would certainly say it on Karka. There's a good reason to exclude Hektish from Bittul Mekach. Because what's going on by Hektish? We're talking about someone who gave a carbon, he put it into Hektish, and now he's coming to be fighted to buy it off Hektish. So what is the reason why Bittul Mekach is the transaction is void? Is because we say this person, his das was not on this transaction. But when we're talking about Hektish, whose das are we talking about? We're talking about the Rebbeinu Shalom's das. How could it be that Rebbeinu Shalom was not cognizant? He's saying it's a Bittul Mekach because he was fooled. No fooling the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's not one. There's more reason to say there's no Bittul Mekach on Hektish. So if you say even on Hektish that is Bittul Mekach, culture can HaKarkais. Not Shenki, Manda HaKarkais, Avagdeshus loy. But the one who says HaKarkais, he'll say, but Hektish not. And what's the explanation of this? Kiddush Shmuel. This is Shmuel that we came across, I think it was yesterday or the day before. A very interesting sheet of Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel. Hektish Shava Mana. If you have Hektish that was worth 100, Shechil al Shava Pruta, and you machal it using just a Pruta, Machul. It's Machul. Because Hektish, like we said, Hektish, there's no fooling the Rebbeinu Shalom. But it goes the opposite way you'd think. You think there's no fooling the Rebbeinu Shalom, so you can never get away with anything. It's the other way around. You can be machal something worth 100, even on a Pruta, because there's no din of a Bittul Mekach on the Rebbeinu Shalom. So that would be the explanation of the Manda Amar says Akakos Avagdeshus loy, according to Rabbi Yaina. I'm sorry, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, because he holds like Shmuel that there's no such thing as Bittul Mekach on Hektish, because there's no Mekach tais, there's no das there to say that it was fooled. Okay, maybe we should leave this question. I don't know. I guess there's nothing else time to daven. So might as well try it. Try the Mishnah. Tan Hassam. We learned in the Mishnah. If over there it's telling the din of Tmura. If you'd had a animal that was kaddish for as a carbon, and you try to be machlef it, you try to replace it with a different animal, or you try to be paided from hektish, it's not going to work. You can't be kaidish, you can't be paida, an animal that's a tamim, that doesn't have a mum, you don't have the ability to be mechalet from hektish. But if it was about mum, then there is a din that you could pay for it and buy it from hektish. If you used the money, let's say it was an animal worth $1,000 and used $100, yatzal chulin, the animal goes to chulin, but you have to compensate for the difference between the value and what you paid. So the machlokes. Amar Rabbi Yochanan yatzal chulin dvar Torah. Yochanan says that midaraisa it takas go midaraisa goes to chulin. It's archlasle damim midavrei, and that what you have to make of the difference is midarabanan. So this is very good with Shmuel, right? Shmuel says that there's no bittul mekach, and you just midarabanan. They're saying you have to make up for the difference. He doesn't hold of Shmuel. He holds that no, if in order to do, you can't underpay even when you're dealing with hektish, and you have to midaraisa pay for it. So my asking, what are you talking about? I know if we're talking about where it's exactly a sixth. How could you say midaraisa? You have to pay the rest of it. We said on exactly, I know that was our Mishnah, right? Our question only here is about Bittul Mecca. But the Mishnah clearly said there is no din of exactly a sixth for hektish. So how could it be that you have to pay for it midaraisa? The Torah said there's no oino on hekdashis. So Elamai it can't be talking about exactly this. Elamai, it's talking about Bittul Mecca. How could you say Rabbi Yochanan tzarich lasle dam midivrayim? Can you say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, only midrabanan he has to pay for it? I'm Rabbi Yochanan akdashis. Rabbi Yirmiyah makakos. Rabbi Yochanan says it's that the din of Bittul Mekach is going even on akdashis. And Rabbi Yirmiyah says it's going on karka. And both of them are told, they're both saying, Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying akarkos, and Rabbi Yochanan is saying even on hekdashis, that there is bittul mekach yesh lahem. If there is bittul mekach, why midivrayim do you have to? Why do you have to pay for it midirabanan if midaraisa bittul mekach yesh lahem? Even on hekdashis. It should be midaraisa you have to pay for it according to Rabbi Yochanan. We're talking about Bittul Mekach. We're not talking about Oino. How do you explain Rabbi Yochanan? Epech to Rabbi Yochanan lo yishlakish to Rabbi Yochanan. You have to say, even though we had it that's saying Rabbi Yochanan says Lasle dam midivrayim, and Rish Lakish says he has to lasses like damim tvar Torah. You have to switch it around and say Rabbi Yochanan was the one who says lasle damim midaraisa because bittul mekach yesh lahem. Okay, we'll stop over here because I think you're gonna have to start davening even without the Rav at some point.